This set is based on linear arrangement of 8 objects, and these 8 objects are 8 films that were screened at Cannes Film Festival in 8 back-to-back slots. Each film was 1 hour in length and belonged to one of the two categories, crime and environment. 4 directors, Viz, Prithus, Rakesh, Yash and Satyajit, each having exactly one film from each category, which means each of the directors got a screen 2 of his film, and one film was from environment and second was one from crime. And some further info is given. In the first statement, it is given that no director had both his film screened back to back, which means same director film were not screened on 2 consecutive slots. Second statement states films on the same category were screened back to back only once, which means there is only one block or only 2 screens that are consecutive and have the same film or film belonging to same category. In the third statement, it is given that first and the last films screened were on environment. First is environment, last is environment. Now, applying this condition second, the possible arrangements of these 8 films are environment, crime, as it is given that there is a block of 2 consecutive films which are from the same category, then environment, crime, environment, crime. Second case is when there is crime after environment, then again environment, 2 crimes, environment, crime. And the third case is environment, crime, environment, crime, environment, crime and environment. And if we try to club 2 environments on 2 consecutive slots, then there will be at least one slot of 2 consecutive screens on which films would be from crime. So 2 crimes cannot be together. So these are the possible 3 arrangements of the films. Now coming to statement 5th, in which it is given that Satyajit's film on crime was not among the first 4 films screened. Now consider the first case. So his film on crime could be either on 5th slot or on 7th. So suppose it is on 5th slot, Satyajit Ray. And in statement 6, it is given that not more than 3 films were screened between the 2 films directed by Satyajit. So the other film directed by Satyajit could be either at 1st slot or at 8th slot. Considering the first 2 conditions, like no director had both his screen back to back, and films on the same category were screened back to back only once, that we have already discussed. So consider the case in which the film on environment by Satyajit was screened at the 1st slot. And now coming to statement 7, in which it is given that only one film of Satyajit was screened before all the films directed by Rakesh and Yash, which means there has to be at least 4 films between the 2 films of Prithus. And if we have a look at the given situation, then only possibility is film on crime by Pratyush has to be on the second slot, and his film on environment has to be on the last slot. Only then will have two films in between based on crime as well as environment, and these films are of Yes and Rakesh. In statement 4th, it is given that Yes film on crime was screened after Rakesh film on crime. So this has to be Rakesh film on crime, and this has to be of Yes, and therefore this has to be Rakesh film on environment, and this has to be Yes film on environment. Now consider the second case, when the film of Satyajit on environment was screened on 8th slot. Then the only possible case for the films of Pratyush was 1st and 7th slot, and accordingly we can check or find the slots for the film of Rakesh and Yes. And when we take 7th slot for the Satyajit's crime film, then his first film has to be at 1st slot, and if we go by this arrangement, then the two films of rather 1st slot, it has to be on the 8th slot, as not more than 3 films were screened between the two films directed by Satyajit, and in that case 7th condition would not materialize. Therefore film of Satyajit on crime could not be screened on 7th slot. So these are the possible cases in the first possibility. Now moving to the second one, when again we assume the 5th slot was for the Satyajit's film on crime. In that case his other film, that is on environment, could be screened on the 1st slot or on this 8th slot. When it is screened on the 1st slot, the film of Pratyush must have been screened on 2nd and 8th slot. After fixing the slots for the films of Pratyush, the slots for the films of Rakesh and Yesraj can be found as given here. And when we take 7th slot for the Satyajit's film of crime, we would not be able to get all the conditions satisfied. Now coming to the last possible case, in which the first film of Satyajit, that is not first, rather film on crime, has to be either on 6th slot or on 7th slot. Considered the case of 6th slot, then his other film could be either on 1st slot or on 8th slot, consider it is on first slot, then second and 8th slots have to be for the film of Pratyus. In that case, we would not get the required slots for the films of Yash Raj and Rakesh. Therefore, it is not a possible case. Similarly, when we place Satyajit's film on crime at 7th slot, the only possible case that we would get for the environment film of Satyajit is 8th slot, and again we would not be able to satisfy the other conditions. So there are in total 3 possible cases that we have on the basis of given information. Let's move to the questions. In the first question, it is asking for how many films can we determine its exact slot. If we have a look at the 3 possible arrangements, we can say that the 5th slot is always for the Satyajit's film on crime, and apart from this, none of the other slots can be fixed for a particular film of a particular director. Therefore, option B is the correct answer. In the next question, it is asking what extra information is required to find out the exact order of his screening of films. First statement is Pratyus and Rakesh's film on crime were screened back to back. Pratyus and Rakesh film on crime is screened back to back. This is the first case which is unique. It doesn't get repeated. Therefore, statement first is alone sufficient to give the answer of the question. Now coming to the second statement, Satyajit's film on crime and Yash Raj's film on environment were screened back to back. Satyajit on crime and Yash on environment. Satyajit on crime and Yash on environment. There are 2 possible cases. These are second and third cases, and these are 2 different cases. Therefore, statement second is alone not sufficient to answer the question. In the third statement, it is given that Yash Raj's film on crime was not screened in the second last slot. Yash Raj's film on crime was not screened on the second last slot. There is only one option, that is second statement. Hence, statement first and third are able to determine the given question. Coming to the next question, which of the following is not a possible slot for S film on environment? From the arrangement, it can be seen that only second slot is not possible for Yash Raj's film on environment. Hence, option A is the correct answer. Coming to the last question, in this question it is asking which of the following statement is definitely true. Film directed by Rakesh was not screened in 7th slot. Across the 3 arrangements, in none of the arrangements Rakesh's film was screened on 7th slot. Therefore, statement first is true. Film directed by Yash was not screened in 2nd slot, that we have already discussed. Therefore, this statement is also true. Film directed by Pratyus was not screened in the 1st slot. That is not definitely true, because his film got screened in 1st slot in one of the cases. Therefore, third may or may not be true. Therefore, none of the statement is definitely false. Hence, option D is the correct answer.